We encourage you to hit the subscribe button right now so you can listen to more podcasts of Operation Truth. Ladies and gentlemen, we do want to hear from you, so we encourage you to email us directly at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. I want you to know that your messages are likely to be heard, addressed, and listened to on air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Palumbo. With me, as always, is my co-host, Tom Fuentes. To remind you, Tom was a former assistant director of the FBI with, I would say, conservatively stating it, quite a distinguished career. I believe his last assignment was overseeing the entire international operation of the FBI, which Tom has actually spoken to in detail on prior podcasts. But I want to start off today having a discussion with you about the borders, which just seem to worsen day by day. And it's becoming more and more evident, even to Democrat elected officials, that there's a problem here. Last podcast, I believe it was, or the podcast before that, I mentioned that the governor of Arizona, Hobbs, is now called in the National Guard. We have outcry from all over the country, especially our major cities like New York and Chicago, where funding, for example, is being allocated towards illegal migrants and not the minority community who are in need. Eric Adams has told you in great detail, it's destroying your city. They're cutting police, fire, sanitation, and even the education budget to fund this migration issue. I don't know where this is all supposed to end, but I want to start with Tom. And this is going to transition right into the Ukraine in a much broader sense. But, you know, what we're learning now is that in order for us to get funding to the border, which is something that deals with our national security, which was discussed by Christopher Wray over 6 months ago in Senate hearings, we have to give $60 billion more to the Ukraine. I wonder if there's a cap on this figure, number one. But in discussing this issue with the Ukraine, I want Tom to go into detail about the pervasive corruption that's hampered this country since we began talking about it. And in addition to that, some of these oppressive tactics that Zelensky, who comes to the United States of all places, the land of freedom, and talks to our government and tries to prop them up to give him more money. So, Tom, give me a little insight as to the extent of this corruption in the Ukraine and what's going on with this funding. In other words, my understanding is that in order for us to get funding for the border, we have to make a deal with this administration to fund the Ukraine another $60 billion on top of the either $115 billion or $120 billion. If you would, Tom.
Okay. I don't think it's necessary, but that's my opinion. President Biden thinks it is. He's the one requesting all of this money to keep going there. I've had my theories that I've spoken about in the past that, you know, it has to do with when you have a corrupt politician and they obtain money from some source, whether it's criminals or another government, you know, that government expects payback. And I think that Biden has, you know, they have the receipts. The House committees have the actual transfers of money from the Ukraine, from other countries like China and Romania, but transfers to the Biden family, and then it would go through a, you know, roundabout routing within the family, going through a number of different LLCs to possibly hide the source, and then it would go to a member, a grandchild, or somebody within the Biden family. Now, my opinion that I've said before, and it's just an opinion, is that Biden will give them whatever they ask for if he can, because they will out him. They will rat him out for having taken money from them, having enabled the job that Hunter Biden had on the Burisma Energy Company board when he had no background in it, and the other money that they just routed, that informants of the FBI talked about the routing of millions of dollars to the Biden family. So now, you know, when Biden's in the presidency, and then you have the invasion of the Russians going into Ukraine, you have Ukraine saying, okay, give us the money. And the Biden administration basically says, we're going to give you everything you need for as long as it takes. Now, what's interesting about the long as it takes statement is just within the last couple of weeks, Biden has changed that term. We presume on purpose. We don't know for sure with him. But the new statement is we're going to give you everything you need as long as we can. That's a big difference from as long as it takes, because they haven't conquered Russia yet. So if you go by the long as it takes definition, that means that we need to keep funding them. Biden believes we need to keep funding them. So basically, Congress has given carte blanche to every request Biden has made that's going to go to the Ukraine. And basically what happens is that the so-called uniparty in Washington, which are Republicans and Democrats, when that request comes from the White House for X billions of dollars, they agree. And then what happens is the money goes to the Pentagon. The Pentagon sends the money to the different companies of the military industrial company, the delegation of companies that make a fortune. And then the companies, in gratitude, send money to the PACs that support the reelection of the various senators and congressmen, Democrats and Republicans, that approve the initial request. So it's a really well-oiled machine to keep the money coming, to keep the money coming from Congress, because they benefit as well. And in a way, we don't know if Ukraine's going to win or lose, but the money's going to keep flowing.
Well, let's start to talk, Tom, about where this money's going once it lands in the Ukraine, because you and I have had an off-camera conversation about this on a couple of times, along with the producers of the show. I think the American public should be, I would say, minimally had their sense of decency offended. Explain a little bit where this money's going, Tom.
Well, the public's had all kinds of reporting in the last couple of years that we're funding the government of the Ukraine. We're paying for government officials' salaries, for their pensions, for their health care. So the money is basically propping up Ukraine as if it's the 51st state of the United States. And a number of members of Congress have talked about that. A number of pundits on TV have called Ukraine the 51st state based on the amount of money we're sending there. Then it's not just money. We're sending military equipment now for the last couple of years, to the point where many military officials, not officials of the government, but military experts that are retired from the military recently, are going on various YouTube and other channels saying that we've pretty much depleted many of our munitions, many of our supplies. And unlike World War II, where the United States could surge and produce airplanes and tanks and ships and ammunition and artillery shells, with the factories working 24/7 to produce it and get it sent to the front, we don't have that anymore. So we don't have the capacity. These companies, Raytheon, I saw quoted the other day saying, we're talking about a couple of years to replenish the supply we just gave away. So this is not something that's automatic that we can just give it away, but we've been doing that. Meantime, Russia has gone to 24/7 production for the last 2 years, and they have dramatically increased the capability of their military.
So let's tie this into the discussion which relates to securing our border. So we're in a negotiation right now with the Republicans in the House and this administration that in order for them to agree to fund $60 billion to the Ukraine, which Tom has just so intelligently outlined, the purpose of which, for example, is pensions and other things that certainly have nothing to do with fighting the Russians, we're looking at an immigration problem here that we're trying to arrest. This month so far has been volunteered by our Customs and Immigration. Over 200,000 people have crossed this border illegally in the first 20 days of this month. I don't know to what extent this emergency has to arise in order for it to meet the standard of addressment. But what I find interesting, Tom, is they want to have the borders funded, right? They want to allocate funds for the border. My question is, have had in prior occasion, what does that translate to? Or is this another vague and ambiguous, we're going to enhance background checks without an explanation what that looks like? So when we start talking about addressing the borders 3 months into this administration's open border policy. What is it we're supposed to do to offset this problem? I said to you before, and I still maintain, and I think you might agree, the horse is out of the stall on this issue. I don't know what it is we're supposed to do to change the tide here. What do you think about this, Tom?
Well, I think that, you have an election coming in less than a year now. And I think it's dawning on many members of Congress and a third of Congress a third of the Senate who are up for reelection in 24, that it's really bad. And the surge from the migrants coming across the border illegally is only going to increase, because what's going out publicly to the world is that this administration at some point is going to crack down on this, or we'll have a new administration in a little over a year, and that administration may shut the border down. So you better hurry up and get into the United States while it's wide open and while you can. And I think that's the fear suddenly that members of Congress have, that this is going to get much worse. Now, you said, the horse is out of the barn and statements like that. Well, it's a horse. It's not the whole herd. And so if more people start coming to the border because they think that it's going to be closed, what's happening now is only going to worsen. And suddenly it dawns on members of Congress, wow, maybe we ought to do something. And up till now, they haven't done anything because, well, the administration has said the border is going to be open. Nothing we can do about that. The president has control of our borders and maintains control or lack thereof. And there's nothing that members of Congress. So all of a sudden, they've decided that, well, maybe they can pull a little bit of an extortion on the administration and say, you know what? You want that funding for Ukraine really badly. We want an increase, or make it look like we're increasing security at the border. So you help us with the border. We'll help you with sending, X dollars to the Ukraine. And so they don't have to close the border. They don't have to do any of that. They just need the appearance for the public that, look, we're doing something. We accomplished a lot. We've had meetings. We've had discussions. What more do you want from us? So that, I think, is what the issue is. Not an expectation on Congress's part that suddenly the Biden administration is going to say, I want that $60 billion so badly that I'm going to help you. We'll close the border. We'll take it back like it was 3 years ago when we had very few people crossing illegally.
Tom, let's be candid about this. We don't have the assets to manage this border at this point. We are spread paper thin. But I don't understand why the security of this nation is predicated on giving money to a foreign entity that's riddled with corruption, that we are funding their social mechanism, pensions, salaries, etc. I don't understand why these two are intersecting. Why do we have to make a deal with the White House to keep the country secure? I'm really struggling with this. And, we haven't even brought up the fact that included in this little legislation they're trying to pass is $14 billion for Israel. I would think, if anything, there would be more money heading towards Israel and less towards the Ukraine. I also keep asking, is there a cap on this amount of money we're going to continue to give to the Ukraine? And I heard what you said before, that he's changed his tune, so to speak. It's for as long as we can routine. But we're talking about the security of the nation. And I'm looking at the Republicans, and I'm not sure that they're not in bed with the Democrats on more levels than you're alluding to because of the election cycle. I hear no mention of this word treason. This is treasonous activity, and I don't find comfort in saying that. I don't like this whole discussion about impeaching our presidents, which seems to be our new norm. We go from president to president now. We throw that word out, impeachment. Every time we throw it out, we dilute the significance of it. But included in the articles of impeachment, one of them should be treason. Why isn't the American public understanding the scope of this government's behavior? I don't get any of this, Tom. Maybe you give me some insight.
No, I don't. Most of the public, I think, is either apathetic or unaware and not trying to be aware of any of this, or took for granted that 3 years ago the border was as closed as it had been in decades, that we had a fairly secure border. So when we talk about, well, we don't have the resources now, where'd they go? They've been reassigned to doing paperwork at the border, doing babysitting, as some people have called it, being a Walmart greeter at the border. Welcome to the United States. and not really enforcing the laws. So we have the assets to do it. We just don't want to do it. Now, I should say we, President Biden doesn't want to do it. And as commander in chief, he controls our borders. He controls the security measures that we use at the borders, um, military measures, whatever it might be, and the ability to negotiate with a foreign country. Now, during the Trump administration, you had Mexico agree to supply 28,000 Mexican troops at the border to keep people in Mexico, keep them from coming across into the United States. You also had the president of Mexico agree to have the stay in Mexico policy that we implemented, so that if you wanted to apply for asylum or refugee status in the United States, you had to go to a location somewhere in Mexico, usually Mexico City, and apply for it there, not cross our border where you're in the United States now. Our authorities give the person a court date. We want to see you in 10 years. You be back in court on that day so we can hear your asylum or refugee request. So all of those things that were in place little over 3 years ago are gone. So you have a wide open border, and you have a lot of the law enforcement officials that are responsible for enforcing the border security are now playing paperwork officials or babysitters or whatever for these people that are now in the United States. Then they get a court date, like I said, come back in 6 years, 8 years, or whatever. You wonder if they're going to show, probably not. And then there they go. They're into the United States. Now, Canada.
Well, there's another little caveat attached to this that people aren't really plugging into. As a result of this administration's border policies, we've created a new cottage industry for the cartels. It's called the smuggling of illegals. We've created a new business for them. Am I right, Tom?
Oh, not just illegal, for smuggling of drugs into the country, smuggling of contraband, which has been going on for many, many years. But now it's increased a lot. And the cartels are making a fortune on every person that they help traffic into our United States, into the border. So, yeah, it's terrible what's going on. And, you don't see any effort up until now to even talk about it. Now you have, Senator Coons from Delaware last week talking about, well, we're going to, the administration's going to have to negotiate with Congress about doing something more at the border, or they're not going to get the money for Ukraine and Israel and everyone else. So that's fine. And I think that the seasoned politicians that run this country are looking at it that we don't actually have to tighten security at the border. We don't have to do anything, but we have to make it look like we are. Create the illusion that we're concerned about this border. And the other reason I think that why they're very concerned is because even Director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, has said this is a matter of national security, having a wide open border. So now what happens is if there's a terrorist act somewhere in the United States and Americans are killed, or a severe cyber attack where our industries or our water supply or electric grid or telephones are shut down through cyber attacks, if any of that happens, everybody's going to be asking, especially their local congressman, what'd you do to prevent it? You heard we were in danger. You heard that our security was in question. What'd you do about it? So now what they have to do is not fix it, but they sure have to look like they're fixing it.
Yeah, but Tom, there's something else attached to this that goes beyond what's transpiring at the borders. It's what's transpiring in many of our major cities, New York, Chicago, Denver, Seattle. There's about 10 of them. They're starting to express this financial duress they're under as a result of supporting illegal people in their cities. So even tomorrow, if they decide, we're going to fund closing the border, which is another vague and ambiguous concept, what are they going to do about the 150,000 of them in New York City right now that are sleeping on our sidewalks approaching the winter months, Tom? In other words, I hear our conversation here. I got it. We're going to put a little smoke and mirror routine on making the public think that we're going to address the borders so we can get reelected. But at the end of the day, this migration issue is hamstringing many of these cities in this country, and it's not getting better on a day-to-day basis. It appears to be getting worse based on the statistics that I just outlined for you regarding the month of December. 200,000 plus in the first 20 days. They're going somewhere in this country. Whether they go by means of Governor Abbott or the federal government, who equally is involved in distributing them to major cities, they're going somewhere, and they're continuing to tax these cities. Tom, unfortunately, I don't think this is going to have a happy ending with this border issue, because it poses such a threat. And like Christopher Wray is saying, it's kind of like not if, it's a when. That's really what it is. I did want to bump into another discussion with you that's kind of interesting. There's a bit of irony here. Mark Fisher, be it Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, he founded the chapter in Rhode Island of Black Lives Matter. And now, recently, within the last couple of weeks, he has announced he's going to endorse Trump for president. And then when questioned about it, he's saying that the economy is bad. That's hurting Black people. All of the issues that are coming up with Bidenomics are not helping Blacks in the cities or in the countryside or anywhere else. And so he feels like he's going to back Trump because it looked to him like Trump is the best candidate to fix some of that. And especially, I think he wants to get on the bandwagon of that Trump is getting more and more support from the Black community, that it's in the 20s now, where it used to be very low before. And so you have a number of Black leaders and officials basically endorsing Trump now, saying, they want to get in on that, because what's happening is that for decades, the Black communities have reelected and continue to reelect Democrats. And in those communities, nothing improves. So they're kind of, he and others are looking at this like, why isn't anything getting better just because we vote for the same people over and over?
Tom, we're starting to, not only with this gentleman, Mr. Fisher, but many other Black prominent leaders are starting to realize that they've been had by the Democrats. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Republican. I'm saying it because it's truthful. In 1965, we implemented welfare, which didn't help the Black community at all. In fact, it made them more dependent upon the architects of welfare, which are the Democrats. I remind everyone, the Democrats were the party of slavery. They pushed back against the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which was pushed through by Lyndon Baines Johnson. Then we went to 1965 and we gave them welfare. Now we're living in a time where we are somehow likening the fleeting of business entities across this country as a form of reparation. Do they not understand what they're doing is ultimately pitting ourselves against one another, which I always thought was only the job of the media, which we're learning it isn't just them. But, this has no light at the end of the tunnel once again, because we can't seem to convince the minority community that the people that are most concerned about their interests happen to be people that are conservative, people that want to enforce the law. I do have to be honest. I'm not seeing a big push with the Republicans to get into these communities and collaborate with the local elected officials or the clergy to get these children educated, which they're entitled to make their streets safer so they're no longer collateral damage from people having shootouts, upgrade their housing, their medicine, and their diet. But I do see this as a positive. Look, you and I are not endorsing Donald Trump. We know this man has issues. I got it in America. He hurt everybody's feelings with his lack of demeanor or decorum. If you're upset with him because of what he's done, saying some words that offended you, how upset were you with the President Clinton when he was accused of rape by Juanita Broaddrick, or any number of women, Paula Jones, Kathleen Wiley, the list is long and distinguished, about sexual harassment, solicitation? I guess he gets a pass because he didn't hurt your feelings. I certainly hope this is not an atmosphere that exists in this country, that you have so much hate for this man that you're prepared to sacrifice this country, because that's the direction we're heading in. And I think you and I both know, Tom, we may not agree. I haven't really queried you on this. I'd like to see some new blood in this discussion, people independent of this manic path we're on right now, or the manic path we just came off of. I got the memo here, folks. We hate Donald Trump. Let's flush the toilet. There's a lot of problems in the country today, Tom. I want to talk to you about something that just happened in Colorado, which you and I are both law enforcement backgrounded people. I didn't realize that we could punish you or impose a punishment for an offense you were never charged with. And another discussion about we've abandoned due process, which seems to be what we've done based on the Obama administration going back to Ferguson. We predetermined the guilt of that police officer before we even started an investigation. What do we have going on in Colorado here, Tom?
Well, similar circumstances. You have activist judges that if they hate Donald Trump, then keep him off the ballot. I think part of this is that many of the prosecutions pending against Trump right now, the civil case in New York, some of the other January 6th case and others, are not going well. The prosecutors are losing different motions that are being made, and there's a lot of speculation that they may not be able to convict Trump in time to prevent him from becoming the president next year. Now, one of the interesting to me aspects is a lot of the information that they've had goes back 3 years ago. How long ago was January 6th? How long ago was the last election? How long ago did all these issues come up that they could have prosecuted them, but they outsmarted themselves thinking, we'll wait, we'll bring the prosecutions right at the time of the election during the primaries, and then the election itself coming up in the fall of 2024. And the reason they outsmarted themselves is these are complicated cases. They're difficult constitutional questions that have not been answered. A lot of motions are going to go back and forth. A lot of discovery is going to go back and forth. And so as a result of that, now it's becoming clear to some of the people that initiated these prosecutions, you know what, we might not be able to get these accomplished in time. That some of the cases have so many thousands of documents that the case itself, with the motions going back and forth and the different stipulations that may require Supreme Court intervention, this could go, those cases could go till 2025, 2026. Now, if they didn't have initiated those 3 years ago when they could have, might be a different story. They might be in court right now. They might be in a position of getting these convictions between now and next November. But they've outsmarted themselves, and as a result, now I think they're panicking. Some of them are panicking in thinking that, you know, we're not going to be able to convict Trump. He's not going to be in jail before November of 24. So the only other answer is keep him off the ballot. So now you have activist judges like in Colorado and several other states right now that think, you know, if we prevent him from being on the ballot, he can't get elected. Doesn't matter whether he was in an insurrection or you want to use laws that go back to the 14th Amendment right after the Civil War. We don't need any of that. If he's not on the ballot, he's not going to get elected. And I think that's a strategy, and we're going to hear about that. Now, the decision in Colorado basically is that they have to have a decision. January 5th is their deadline for starting to publish the candidates on the ballots for the primaries. So they've already said, that court said, we're putting this into effect. Trump is kicked off the ballot, except we're going to stay decision. In other words, delay the final decision until the day before the primaries deadline, which is January 4. We're going to hold the decision knowing that this is probably going to the Supreme Court. And if we have to delay it longer because it's in front of the Supreme Court, we'll do that. So that's why you see this, you know, the big announcement. They've kicked Trump off the ballot, but not quite and not yet.
I'm sure you heard Biden, and I guess it was kind of like a soundbite. They threw a question out at him regarding insurrection and Donald Trump, and he has accused Donald Trump of insurrection. So I have a very interesting follow-up for him. If it is your belief as the president of the United States that this individual committed an insurrection or participated in one, why hasn't he been charged? Good question, I would think, ladies and gentlemen. And unfortunately, we've come to the end of this podcast for today. I hope this information we're providing you is useful. We're just giving you food for thought. We encourage you to fact check us. We encourage you to challenge what we're saying. Sometimes I just say, you have to see the forest for the trees, number one, and you have to know when to come in from the rain, which seems to really be the problem. And Tom Fuentes mentioned that people are disinterested or distracted or doing things other than paying attention to the direction in which their country is heading. But I will tell you this, it's not going to get better until you get involved. And by getting involved, that means you have to vote. We're not telling you who to vote for. I think you have to take a look at what's going on in your country, ask yourself who's positioned us in the manner in which we are, and then cast your vote accordingly. I wouldn't be so bold as to tell you who to vote for. I have my own ideas. I've expressed them very gingerly, so to speak, so I don't affect anybody or impact anybody from Google or any of these other groups that monitor us and decide whether or not you should hear what we're saying, because we're living in some really interesting times right now. When we come back on the next episode, I want to discuss with Tom the impact of the media, the continuing impact with the media, the lack of oversight, and the fact that there's just no accountability in America today. I thank you for joining us, Tom. I thank you, as always, for your contributions, which you cannot quantify their value. This has been Operation Truth. My name is Lou Palumbo. Tom Fuentes. No, I'm only Lou Palumbo. I'm speaking for Tom Fuentes.
Thank you,
And
Lou.
we'll see you next episode.